Hello, everyone. Very good morning, good evening, wherever you're looking at this interview from. The open floor with Nishank is finally back, and I'll not go into the integrities of the show much, but thank you so much for everyone who's been still here. I know the kind of warmth and love we received for the teaser, and here we are. And I think with 2026, a very happy new year to everybody, to my guest. And we'll do the formal round of introductions for you, ma'am, like we do. I think when I say the open floor with Nishank is back, I don't think I could have had a more powerful way to begin 2026 with. I mean, for me, today's guest represents everything this platform also stands for: clarity of thought, commercial courage, and a deep commitment to using law as a tool for real impact. Manasi Chaudhari is someone, I am sorry, ma'am, I'm taking you on a first name basis, but Manasi Chaudhari is someone who's lived the law across its full spectrum, from litigating before the courts, Supreme Court, High Court, to advising high growth companies and global brands in complex commercial and cross border transactions, to building and running her own firms, units from the ground up. Currently leading the corporate and commercial practice in Numen Law Offices. I think Mansi ma'am brings in a rare combination of sharp legal precision and also, I think, commercially grounded judgment, which is very important. And I think it's also shaped further by her academic training in law and finance from the University of Oxford, which we'll obviously ask questions about and she'll shed light on. But I think for me, what truly sets her apart is that her influence goes far beyond boardrooms and deal tables. She is the founder of Pink Legal, India's first digital platform dedicated to women's legal rights, a movement that has reached, ma'am, at least over a million women and has been recognized by United Nations Women as well. And at a time, I think, when access to legal knowledge can change lives, you've not only made the law simpler, you've also made it more actionable and I think deeply human. You're also the best selling author of Legally Yours, a book that breaks down the law in a language women can actually act on, providing that legal knowledge doesn't need to be intimidating to be powerful. So I think everything, lawyer, founder, author, institution builder, if I would have to put it into perspective. And I think most importantly, someone who understands how legal decisions play out in the real world, where timing, clarity, and commercial judgment matter as much as legal correctness. And if any of you have not checked out her profile, please do it on LinkedIn. The kind of insights she has, it's really interesting for any aspirant to sort of get into the nitty gritties and know-hows of how all of this is functioning. And we're honored, ma'am, to begin this year with a conversation that sits at the intersection of law, business, leadership, and purpose. Please join me in welcoming our very special guest, Mansi Chaudhary, to Open Floor with Nishank. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us today.
Thank you, Nishank. Thank you for inviting me. And I think I feel very special that I am your guest on, when you're restarting your show. So thank you for having me as your guest for that and for the very warm and wonderful introduction. I think y'all really hype up your guests a lot.
Nothing like that. Actually, it's just the research team. Credit to them. But idea being, ma'am, that everything that I spoke, I also actually spoke from my heart. Generally, we have a formal round of introductions. We read it out. And I don't know where to begin this from, because I think this is going to be one of those shows is not just about legal aspirant. Anybody is also doing businesses or, thinking about starting something up from the ground. You are one of the greatest personalities in that space as well. And we'll talk about the different nitty-gritties. Let's just first put things into perspective. We are into 2026. How was 2025 for you, ma'am? And what does the new year look like? I mean, we all have. It's human to have those set of resolution goals. And I see you also interacting with a lot of people always on the ground. Do you have any specific goal in mind for 2026?
For 2026. Oh, I'm so sorry. Just a moment.
No worries, no worries.
Yeah. So 2025 has been amazing. I had some really nice new experiences in life, one with my book coming out. So, experience as an author. Then I also experimented with teaching. I taught in Jindal, and I'm also teaching in Bawo School of Entrepreneurship in Hyderabad. So that helped me, really open up my mind and realize that this is also something that I enjoy along with, the practice of law. So in that way, 2025 was great in terms of helping me open up my mind to more than practice of law and the various avenues that come along with law. I loved that, and of course, I joined Numen Law Offices. So, but that I did not mention first because it's part of my legal practice.
Correct.
But what was different was, something which is slightly away from the regular work, and
Correct.
that's why 2025 was special for me.
Absolutely. And moving forward, I mean, you wrote a very interesting post, in fact, about the power of manifestation. And with the kind of, I'll tell you a very simple sort of anecdote also from what law students feel. So they feel that, let's say if they're going for some internships, and we'll talk about that, or they want to land a particular job, and there are so many requests about them being placed at a particular firm, XYZ, whatever it is. We're also going to talk about that. But the power of manifestation, in the sense that when you believe in something truly, or you aspire to be in a particular position, does it actually sort of pan out for you? Do you think that is the reality of how your life has also been structured, your journey from starting from, I mean, Jindal Global Law School and then to Oxford and so on?
I think so. I do believe in the power of manifestation, and along with manifestation, basically the power of dreaming. I always believe that dream big because dreams are free. Nobody is going to charge you based on the size of your dream.
Correct.
And nobody is here to sit and hold you to ransom that, oh, this is what you dreamt, how dare you, or, have you really done it? So it's in your head, dream however big you want. And dreaming is also a part of manifestation, right? Because what are you manifesting? You're trying to manifest your dreams.
Correct.
I definitely do believe in it. And I recently shared on LinkedIn as well how, it was a very, very small thought that because I've always loved writing, I thought that, maybe someday I would want to become an author. And it came true, much before I could have anticipated, or even if I had tried, probably I would not have known how to make it happen. But the universe just makes it happen for you.
Absolutely.
So, that is why I believe in that. But of course, that being said, you can't just dream, you have to work towards it. So if
Absolutely.
I had not probably, built Pink Legal, and then HarperCollins discovered Pink Legal and they liked it, and that's how they reached out to me, it wouldn't have fallen in place. So you have to dream and work towards making that dream happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you can see it in here, speak it from here, and you actually work towards it by God's grace, things do happen, and it has happened for the best of the people. So many inspiring stories, so many inspiring journeys we've also covered across the last 4 to 5 years of the show, ma'am. But let's get into the nitty-gritties, especially given that the show is for legal aspirants. First, a very important question that comes to mind is that how do these people select their law school? Because you are somebody who chose Jindal at a time wherein Jindal was very new, from what I understand. I think this is the 2011 to 16 batch, correct me if I'm wrong. And I think Jindal was founded in close to about 2009, and that is a very quick decision, in the sense that and then you also went in with a scholarship. You secured a scholarship, you went in into Jindal, whether, and there is also a sort of always a debate around NLU, non-NLU law colleges, private colleges, and so on. When you're taking the first step of your career, that is, you decide your law college that maybe I want to do law. And why, firstly? So my two questions essentially are, why law for you? Why did you, or when did you figure out? Because a lot of students have this question figuring out itself, that why, even if I should go to law or not. And then second, why and how do you choose your college of law?
Right. So why law and when law? I think I decided that I wanted to be a lawyer when I was in class 8. So I was about 14 or 15 years old then. And at that age, you really don't know a very deep intellectual, reasoning as to why you want to do something. It was instinct and it just came to me naturally. And I thought that this is the profession I want to do. Even though it's not that, I had my father or anybody in my immediate family who I could observe. Um, But since then I have never once thought that I made the wrong decision. So therefore it was instinct that told me, you know that I want to be a lawyer. And my grandfather was a high court judge in the Bombay High Court. But I grew up in Hyderabad, so I don't know if there's some kind of a genetic connection, but apart from that it was just instinct. And as far as it comes to choosing law school, yeah, I was the third batch that joined Jindal, and it was very new. So it was kind of a gamble that we were taking when we were joining it, because you have to trust that the institute you're joining, and it doesn't have a history, it doesn't have a batch that has graduated so far. So you have to really trust on the fact that they will go ahead and do great stuff. I had a choice between joining a national law school and Jindal, and at the same time, I also wanted to go to the UK to do my undergrad. But I took a lot of advice from seniors, and I realized that it's not ideal to do your undergrad in law in a different country, because law is very country specific, even though Indian law is derived from British law.
Right.
So therefore, I felt that Jindal was a good kind of a middle ground between wanting to go abroad, where Jindal provided me with a similar, say maybe like the exposure or the faculty that would teach us, and the kind of access and facilities. So in terms of that, I felt it was a good middle ground, and that is why I chose Jindal to do my undergrad.
Okay. So, like, from what I gather, like, faculty could be one of the important decisions. The kind of exposure it offers in terms of both the national and the international spaces could be one of the decisions. Ma'am, when you say that you came, like, you found a balance, sort of a ground here with Jindal, or the fact that, like you said, that the law is very country specific. And so doing the undergrad would not be that wise of a decision from abroad. But that switch happened in terms of masters, which is a different game from doing your undergrad from here. So you completed your undergrad from Jindal. That's how you identified your college. Maybe a bit of the instinct. I like the fact that you're very honest about that you liked law from before. A lot of people just come here and say that it happened. And then the reality is that they were preparing for it from class 10, 11, and 12. But the idea that you knew what you wanted is very important. I think that is one lesson that any law student can pick on. Maybe see and compare their interests and strength areas to whichever subject area that they want to be interested in, and then probably understand whether you want to do law or not. But ma'am, how does this, and in fact also if you can tell us if there are any scholarships for this, how did this happen that you decided to go to Oxford? Next step was Oxford in your career journey. A lot of people in fact ask these questions, if whether LLM is worth pursuing, if LLM is worth pursuing in the sense of doing practice here in India, and should people stay back maybe a 4 or 5 year, do the practice and then do an LLM? What is your take on it, given that you went to Oxford?
So I decided to go to Oxford because I always dreamt of going to Oxford, even in law school. It was definitely something that I aspired for. Maybe not immediately out of law school, but it was always on, I said, right, dream big, and nobody's going to ever question your dreams. So it's something I always dreamt of, but I never thought it would be possible, because it's a scary dream and
Right,
something that may not come true. There are high chances that it won't come true.
right,
But I felt that 5 years into my career, the timing was right. I was in a space where I was ready to grow further and explore further, and get out of my comfort zone. And that is why I decided it was the right time for me to pursue my master's.
okay,
I did not think of applying to Oxford. Honestly, I was so scared to apply that I did not even consider it. But my mentor at Jindal, Professor Deepika Jain, who's been my mentor since the first year of law school, and she is now the dean of
right,
Jindal Global Law School.
right,
So she's been very instrumental in my journey. And she had one day, I remember, she just like called me and we had a long chat. And she was like, "How can you not apply? Just apply. Like apply to both Oxford and Cambridge." And after that is when I decided, okay, let me apply. I had crossed the scholarship deadlines, etc. For these applications, but I just went ahead and did it. So it was definitely, something that I was planning, but that push that I got from my mentor made me apply to the right places. which were probably right for me.
Right.
And coming to the LLM part of your question, I would say, yeah, LLM is certainly not compulsory for your law practice because LLM is an academic degree, or
Right.
most LLMs are an academic degree. Mine was slightly different, which is why I chose it. It is not purely academic, it's law and finance. So it's got a lot of practical application also. So whether or not to do an LLM really depends on what is your reasoning behind it. There could be multiple reasons, right? One could be that sometimes it helps in profile building, which is a very valid reason. So if you're going to a very prestigious university, which is going to add credentials to your profile and give you, new opportunities or open doors for you, it's definitely something worth considering. Other reasons for doing LLM are because you want to specialize in a particular subject, which is why you would choose that, or because you want to probably pivot. Say you've been working in a certain field of law and you want to switch, which is what a lot of my classmates from law and finance did. Many of them wanted to switch from law to finance, so they did this course, and then now many of them are into investment banking or they're financial advisors. So these could be the reasons why you choose an LLM. And whether to do it or not is a very personal decision. But I would say that I've been seeing this trend of everybody trying, thinking that okay, an LLM is something that they must do. It is a very expensive commitment. LLMs are expensive, especially LLMs abroad are very expensive. Loans, or even having family pay them off, is again quite a challenge and task which we don't talk about in public, right? So that is an important consideration that you should take and think about whether you're really going to get the returns on it. Because if you come back to India after your LLM and say you want to do litigation, then an LLM is not going to be very useful in your day to day litigation unless you're really practicing constitutional law in the Supreme Court, which is a very minor, like a very minor percentage of lawyers who will actually do that, right? Because you will be probably in the lower courts, high courts, wherever it is. And secondly, even in terms of corporate law, I have seen from my experience of my batchmates around me, it's not that the LLM will really give you an edge in terms of salary or a higher position in the firm if you don't have the skills that they need for that particular position. So the firm will not care whether you're getting the skills from an LLM or from learning them on ground from another law firm or anywhere else. What they care is, are you right for that particular role? And that is how you will be placed. So these are a couple of cautions that I would tell students to keep in mind before choosing an LLM and to set the expectations right. Of course, it gives you great exposure and it gives you, great memories. It gives you great academic perspectives, which are amazing to have. But think of the pros and cons and find that balance and make the decision for yourself and not out of peer pressure.
Correct, correct. No, firstly, I think thank you so much for pointing out the financial reality of it. And I mean, I was going to ask you this question, but you already answered it. It's very important in terms of, the kind of return on investment we talk about, in terms of not just knowledge, but also the financial part is a practical reality for a lot of people. A lot of people cannot afford that kind of a schooling or, even going abroad. And then putting that pressure on the parents or the family is also everything needs to be justified to the sense, you need to have a direction where you're working to. So that is first. Ma'am, I gathered two very important thoughts from what you were saying. One thing that you brilliantly put out, and I think there's a shout out also to Deepika ma'am. She is a great mentor to I think have. Ma'am, but this mentorship, that's the first part, in fact, of my question. You said she was your professor. This identification of somebody who can guide you, because you told in the very beginning also how your grandfather was a judge, but then that may be genetics, but you had nobody around to look for in terms of law. And so that is what most first generation lawyers also feel. They feel a little misguided, or they feel that we are not sure what we're getting into. So having that mentor really helps out, because then you can have these conversations freely with somebody. How do you decide that this person is good enough to be my mentor? Or maybe where do they find this mentor? Can it be a professor? Can it be somebody they intern under? how do they sort of make that connect, that it develops into that mentorship space first. Second, you've mentioned very importantly about skilling. And I think that is what it boils down to. Any fundamental discipline, not only law, if you have the right skill set, you will be valuable. I think you made, despite, and that's very humble of you also, given that you've done your LLM from Oxford, you chose to pick on the reality of the fact that the skill sets matter a lot. In today's era, where AI is also come into the picture, you have so much integration in terms of, let's say, contract drafting, negotiations, XYZ areas of skill sets that have opened up in terms of the different branches of law. How does a student focus on building that skill set? So the first part is about mentorship. The second is about skill set. How do we, let's say, in terms of internships, maybe we can learn from internships, or is there any other way? Or for you, was there any other way when you picked up certain skills of law that have helped you into, making the career that you have made for yourself?
Okay, so let me answer the first part first about mentors. And for a long time, I made this mistake where I would think that you can go just walk up to somebody and ask them, "Can you be my mentor?" And they'll say yes or no. But I realized that that's not how it happens, because true mentorship is really organic. It is not a formal structure where you sign up for a mentorship and they say, "Okay, we accept you as a mentor." It just happens, and then you realize that okay, this person has been mentoring me, or I have been mentoring somebody else. So that's how it happened with me and Professor Jen, because she taught me in the first year of law school, and I was so awestruck and inspired by her that I took up every single course that she offered in college. Whatever it was, I took it up just because I wanted that opportunity to learn from her and be in her classroom. And that's how we built a relationship. I would ask her for guidance, and I also kept in touch after law school. So 5 years after law school is when she really told me to go for it, right? So which is a relationship that has lasted. I built another mentor during my internships. In the second year, I had interned with a company secretary, and there again, I built a very good relationship with my boss. And she was also, I would always have the comfort of calling her and asking her for advice if I ever needed, or if I get stuck in corporate law, because company secretaries are very well versed. So she would always guide me. So mentorships always happen organically, and they happen with people whom you have an interaction with, which is positive, and it has to be two-way. So one is that you of course find them inspiring and feel that they have something that they can mentor you about, and secondly they have to find you a valuable person whom they want to invest time in to mentor, because they see that potential or that dedication, sincerity in your work ethic, which is why they feel that okay, I want this person to grow and I'm going to help them out of their niceness. So it has to be a two-way street, and it can happen anywhere around you. So your professors, your seniors in law school, it could be somebody at an internship, a senior colleague at an internship, it could be anybody, right? And the second part of your question was about skill sets, right?
Right. Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of skill sets, I think I have built certain skills that help me understand what career path I want to take, as a combination of classroom learning and internships. So I remember that in my third year of law school, I had taken up a course on entertainment law offered by Professor Arpan Banerjee, and that was a very practice oriented course. And that course got me very excited about that subject. And I felt that I want to pursue it more. And then I went ahead and did an internship in entertainment law immediately afterwards, where I got practical insights into how it works. So I interned in Viacom 18, and that's again a big studio where they have multiple channels under them. So of course, as a third year intern, they are not going to give me important work, right? They're not going to put me onto deals and contracts. And I remember my work was literally, one of my seniors gave me a contract, and they said, find and replace. They gave me a word, and you have to do find and replace in the contract and give it back to them. So that is the kind of work you may get as an intern, because you are just there for 1 month. But in that time, whenever they would give me these contracts to do minor changes, change the name of the party, or some more, small changes here and there, I would read the entire contract. I would understand it by myself, and I would make notes that, what is this contract really about? What is this transaction about? And that is how I would learn more about the deal, like what is actually happening, instead of just focusing that my task is about that find and replace and thinking that I'm not learning anything. So that was, that is how I learned some skills. And then I personally feel I learned a lot in smaller internships, as in when I interned with, firms where I could have a direct one-on-one connect with the founder. And there was a lot of on ground, because in these smaller internships, you really get to do hands-on work. You are made responsible for real tasks, and that helps you learn and grow. Versus when you are a small, ignorable part in a large enterprise, where of course they're not going to trust you with anything apart from find and replace, or photocopy something, print out something, or do some research work, right? So but those internships are again great for observational learning, where you observe how does the firm work, what is the kind of day-to-day life, what are the kind of, like, what are the associates working on, etc. So observation learning, you can, definitely that's helpful, but for building your personal skill sets, these smaller setups are always better.
Correct. No, that's absolutely right. In fact, I was just, also thinking about how, in terms of first, the mentorship is also a very selfless act. I'll just reflect on that first. And so I'll also talk about the selfless aspect of your thing. I mean, just the fact that we mentioned the word selfless, and I have so much in my mind with respect to Pink Legal, with respect to Nayari. Is that the name of the
Diary.
yeah, okay. So we'll also talk about that, and also to the idea of how you sort of mentioned it very clearly, that it has to be something that has to be very organic. Like it is something that builds as a connect over a period of time. I like the fact that you mentioned that it was after 5 years of law school, so that relationship stayed. And I think that is what matters fundamentally to having any kind of a mentor, whether you mention the company secretary. But ma'am, more to the skill part, this is something that I observed, in fact, with a lot of students who ended up actually also getting placements, good jobs at tier two, tier one law firms, or whatever their career goals was, they would always go beyond the internship. You mentioned a very specific aspect of you would get a simple work which even the laptop now or with AI you can simply just find and replace. But I like how you went beyond that, and you said that, I would learn about the different nitty-gritties related to what is written in the contract, or the fact that how theory combines with the practice. So you learned about a specific area of law in your law school, and then you managed to land an internship in relation to that. And then finally, that combination of theory and practicality works so much better. Apart from this, like, ma'am, in general, given that you've donned so many hats, you've stepped into so many shoes, and this is where probably we can also talk about in terms of a lot of law students also opening up startups. They are either working in the legal field, they're working in the business development area. It is a very different spectrum. Doing a job and being the employer is are both two very different spectrums, but they also merge in certain areas, right? You are somebody who's worked across the spectrum, and we are also going to talk about specifically about what you did on those 5 years before you made that decision. But ma'am, how different it is, firstly, for any sort of law student who's also thinking about doing a venture, whether it's a business venture or a social enterprise. Secondly, how do you start this? Like, this mind, this concept that you build over a time, because a lot of people have ideas. The problem is not really just the idea, it's the execution. And once you start executing any and everything, and any sort of founder who's come on this is attested to it, is that once you start building is when you realize the actual problems that also comes in with building of a community, building of a venture. So how do you exactly transition? And probably this can also correlate to the fact that how beautifully you mentioned about some of the students pursuing law and finance in Oxford, and then going on to doing switching into completely different roles. So my question in specific is that when this switch happens, when you learn about the law, and you whether want to go into entering in a new venture or you want to switch fields, how does law firstly prepare you for that? And secondly, what is it like to start your own thing? How different is it from doing a job at a law firm or working as an advocate across district courts, high courts, supreme courts, and so on?
So I think law prepares you for most things in life because it's a degree which is very rigorous. It requires a lot of discipline. It requires you to critically think. So instead of just being given something and learning it up, you really have to think and question. You have to apply your mind, which is something you have to do in every day. It teaches you negotiation, which you have to do as a everyday skill set. It teaches you how to read the fine print, and it also you can walk around with a surety that people will not take you for granted because you will be able to read the fine print, and if tomorrow something happens, some injustice happens to you, you will know how to take action instead of feeling helpless. So I
Correct.
think in those terms, law is a fantastic degree and learning experience to have. Then coming to switching from working for somebody else or in another firm to starting up something of your own. So the transition really happens. Firstly, you have to be ready. You have to be somebody who wants to do this for the right reasons, and not because oh, I want to take Mondays off, or I want to work from home, and because that looks very rosy. It looks very rosy that you're going to be your own boss, and that's the reason you want to do a startup. But honestly, the ground reality is that now you are responsible for bringing in the money, for paying your own salary, for paying the salaries of people who work with you. You are also the final person responsible for anything when it comes to dealing with clients. So there is nobody above you who's checking your work or who will take the hit for you. It is your reputation on the line. If something goes wrong, the client is not going to blame the firm. They are going to say you are a bad lawyer, and they will not recommend you. They will probably tell five other people not to come to you, right? Plus, you have to run a team, and you have to learn how to. So, it is an entire practice of not just law, but also understanding how to run an enterprise. And these two really come together when you switch from working in somewhere else and working for yourself, and that is something you have to be really prepared for. And therefore, even when I look at because I work in the startup economy quite a bit, and when I look at venture capitals or anybody else who is investing in a company, in a startup, they don't invest in the idea, nor do they invest in the process. Who do they invest in? They invest in the founder. They try to understand, is the founder bankable or not, and when things get difficult, is the founder going to stick through that journey, or are they going to give their hands up and be like, no boss, I tried this, now I can't do it, and I'm going back to a comfortable job, or a stable income and stability, or are they going to really see this through? And that's what they look at. So those are certain skill sets that you need when you switch from a job to running your own enterprise.
Right, absolutely. Being bankable is very important. I think startup ventures also, they often, and I see the startup culture that's booming and that's brilliant. But the reality, the harsh reality, we were having a discussion with one of the other experts. They come in from, another MNC, and they were talking to us about how startup ventures are sold as a thrilling blend of innovation, freedom, and exponential growth. And this immediately reflected with the idea of when you said that you are not going to be drinking a cup of coffee on a Monday, and then that is not going to be, I mean, there seems to be a very rosy picture around it. I think the reality usually looks more like, I mean, for somebody who's starting on scratch, maybe does not have the best funding, also is still figuring out. It's like chasing clients with a pitch deck in one hand and maybe self-doubt in another. And this is obviously owing to whatever conversations I've had with the people who just started something. They build it and then they will come with collapses very quickly. I think people also realize that no one is waiting for your product or service. No one owes you attention, especially in a country like India. Your first round of customers might even come in through like cold mails more than any viral success. Progress can be slow, rejection can be frequent, and I think even small wins might feel suspiciously temporary. So, somewhere I think between the fifth pivot and the 10th unanswered follow up, we might learn that finding clients isn't maybe always about genius ideas. It's about persistence, humility, or the ability to laugh at yourself while asking once again, just checking in on this. And all these things happen, ma'am. So I think we'll also move towards the closure of the show with one or two more questions. But ma'am, whether it was Pink Legal, whether it was the other projects that you're working with, also before we just delve into that, ma'am, you decided to do litigation. You decided to go and do the different aspects of litigation. How important it is for somebody, and this is also based on my reflection with Sarvesh sir. He was here, he's a partner in JSA. He's the one who's, and I see a big similarity in that sense that he said, I first went on to do litigation. Even though I knew that somewhere I wanted to join a law firm, he knew that he wanted to join a law firm. Ma'am, how does litigation help? Because this really struck me about your profile, because most of us who are pursuing law career as an option, when they're given this option of tier 1 law firms or tier 2 law firms or whatever it is, and that pre-placement offer, we accept it and we move on. You are somebody who's come in and you are like, no, I'm going to start working from the ground. I'm going to learn about the nitty-gritties of everything from the ground, and then probably move into a setup that's related to a firm. How does this transition happen, and how important is it in terms of, how much do you give credit to your litigation journey? How much credit do you give to your litigation journey into what has panned out today, especially in terms of being a partner at Numen Law Offices?
So I would give a lot of credit to, the litigation foundation that I have, and I would, advise every law student, if possible, you must experience litigation, because litigation or courtrooms is where the real law is, right? Like that is what law is. What we do in corporate firms is hardly maybe 1% of the actual law that plays out. So it's very important that you know what, as a lawyer, at least for me, I knew that. In fact, this actually happened with an incident. We were on a road trip and there was an accident. And, I was a student at that time and we had a lawyer with us. And so, everybody turned to the lawyer and asked her, "Okay, what should we do now? Should we file an FIR or what are we supposed to do?" And she said, "Don't ask me, I'm a corporate lawyer." And when I heard that, I was like, okay, I never want to be that lawyer who is a lawyer but doesn't really know what is to be done on ground. And that is why I felt that, I definitely want to see what are real courtrooms like, what happens in the courtrooms, how do disputes pan out. And I feel that it helps me a lot in terms of my commercial practice, because it gives you a 360-degree understanding of what is going to happen tomorrow when you're advising your client about risks in a transaction, you're advising them about how to structure the dispute resolution or whatever else it is. You are able to tell them that, look, tomorrow if there's a dispute, this is how it will happen, or this is how we can avoid it by putting in these structures in place. Or if at all there is a dispute, a client, you want to be in a position where you can really advise your client in an overall manner and not say that I can only tell you about 1% of your work and then the rest of it you figure it out somewhere else. Even if you don't actually go to the court, but you should be able to tell them, that this is how you can go about it. So I feel that litigation really gives you that base of knowing how a complete law circle would look like, and that will strengthen your practice.
Absolutely, ma'am. I think that's a brilliant answer. And in fact, from whatever little understanding I have had of the legal practice, I can attest to that. And like you said, about everything that you need to learn, that incident wherein that person said that, I don't know how, and I can't, I don't even know how to put it. This is something that has happened with me. But we were not in an accident, but, we had this senior with us. And there was a situation, and they said that, I don't work in this space. I don't know. And so we had to get down. We get down to the station or wherever, and then we figured things out. But the fact that you said that I didn't want to be this lawyer, I think in that ways it equips you with everything. And that is probably to my final question for today. And then I'll just sort of take in your comments a little bit about the show also, because that we put as a clip and then we run. No, just kidding. But yeah, to the final question also, especially about the fact that, before we close this, as a partner at Newman Law, working closely with growing ventures, what is one mistake you see or legal mistake you see that the founders make, too late? And what would you encourage them to do earlier if they want to build a company that's truly investable and sustainable? You are somebody who's acquired all the basics of the, different kinds of things. And I think as the founder, if you do not know how to do XYZ things, it becomes very difficult for you to monitor if that person is also doing that correctly or not. So, what is it that you feel that since you've worked so much in the startup economy, what is that one mistake that founders make that probably they realize very late? And then, by that time, it's like, oh, okay, so we've really messed up. What would be your one last advice to anybody who's between this venture of being a legal aspirant or a founder? And then we'll just take a closing message for the show and the law students, and we'll close on that note.
So, one advice I would give to founders is to get your legal and financial health of your startup right from the beginning. A lot of times, founders are so invested in their idea and executing that idea that they forget that, if they don't have the it's like a backbone, right? The legal and the finance of a company. If they don't have that in place, no matter how many limbs, fingers, toes you build, it's not going to have that foundation. And I've seen these mistakes happen a lot of times where, say, a few friends get together and they build a startup, and they don't have a strong founders agreement which really tells you who owns how much of the company, or like what how do they resolve disputes, how do they resolve decision making where there's a difference of opinions. And then, say 1 or 2 years later there is a disagreement, and everything is in a limbo because you haven't thought of these situations before. And by then your startup has already grown, it has built some value, and then it becomes even more difficult to resolve these issues. There are also issues where founders don't, they forget that they should really trademark the name of their product or their company. And that's important because, if firstly, trademarking takes time, and secondly, you need to, before you start using a brand, you should know that you have that brand available for using, and there's no conflict with any existing brand. And you need to be able to protect your brand once you build it. So this trademarking process is also equally important, because once your brand is built and then you realize that, okay, now I don't have the trademark, what am I supposed to do? The customer association with that brand is so important that this one small thing, which would probably cost you 9,000 or 10,000 rupees at the starting, will now become a very big issue, which you have to do a lot more of paperwork to clean up. So, these small things, starting off, if you have them right, and this, of course, you will know only if you have certain legal advice, because otherwise it's impossible to think about all of these various scenarios and come together. But I would advise that legal and finance, don't ignore it. Take it as seriously as you take your product if you want to build something to scale.
Correct. And that's something that is sustainable also. I think I can think of a real life example and then we'll take the closing question. And I'm not going to name the individual, but I mean, this has happened. And if anybody who's watching this, please take this seriously. In fact, one of the funded startups, it had close to 70 lakhs of funding. In India, lost about 9 months of their payment because their vendor contract, it lacked a basic penalty clause. In fact, that is what I was looking up right now. The vendor just kept delaying, and the startup ended up having like no legal recourse to recover their dues quickly. And so, just a simple clause ended up costing him that entire amount of money. And it can get really serious, in fact, in terms of disputes. And a lot of friends started. This is there. This is an actual culture that you're talking about. A lot of people come together and they're like, okay, वो देख लेंगे. I've heard terms like अरे वो देख लेंगे, that is not going, because when you're starting something out, dispute is the last thing you have in your mind. But then when it ends up happening, at some point it might, and we are human enough to have that kind of maybe dispute. It is very important that you are protected, your ideas are protected, your interests are protected, and especially this trademark. I mean, you must be knowing also so many trademark disputes happen based on the fact that they're not even registered, and even though they had the brand name, somebody else is using it now. So these are really, really useful insights. I think we can close the show on that note. One last question. If you had to give a final message to all aspirants who are watching the show, and whatever you want to comment on the show, please do. But if you had one final message to anybody, any legal aspirant across sitting across India, are essentially it is show is situated for people across India who's starting out from no matter what college or is already in their fifth year and is going through their bits of struggles and whatever it is. What is your one last message that you would tell them through this show that reaches out to thousands of these people?
If there was one message, I would say don't be afraid of failure and rejection. That happens in everyone's life. And if you face certain rejection, say in a job or an internship, or you feel that you've like failed at something you wanted to, it's okay. Just pick yourself up, and how you get yourself out of this failure is what will determine your future, and not the past, which is the failure. And a rejection is just, it's just a no. It's not a determination of your self-worth or your skill set. It's just probably a mismatch of compatibility or circumstances. Don't take it too hard, don't take it personally, and keep trying. If you shoot 100 arrows, 10 will come back to you. And you for that, for those 10, you have to shoot those 100 arrows. So yeah, that would be my one message. And as for the show, I would say brilliant. I'm so inspired by the community that you've built, and the fact that you have this show. I would have loved to have something like this when I was a law student. I'm sure I would have watched every episode to get as many insights as possible from the various experts that you bring. So I'm sure that your community and all the aspirants are really benefiting from it. So kudos to you for bringing all of this together.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I request the editors to specifically cut out this part and put it as the beginning of the video. No, in all my humility and in all whatever perspective I've gathered from you today, I'm really thankful, firstly, for you for tuning up to the show. And I wanted to start. I don't know. I have this affiliation towards people from Jindal in the sense that especially alums have gone on to do great things. I remember doing this exact same thing when we had taken a break, and I started out with Ravina Kumari Sethia ji. I think she's right now a principal associate at SAM. And ma'am, today with you, who's a partner at Numen Law Offices, I think I'm just in the awe of the kind of work that you've done. And I told you that I'll talk about this. And this is my honest opinion. I think it's very different and very difficult. If I have to, it's not easy to write a book. Does not matter if it becomes a bestseller or not. In your case, it did. But just getting to the process of starting to write, and I'm saying that because of the all the other things that you're doing. You're already co-founder, founder of multiple ventures. You are a partner at law firms. I know at Newman Law Offices. I know how challenging that can be. And apart from that, here you are. You're writing a book. You're doing this talk show. I will not be surprised if after some months I see you starting a show of your own. Also, I mean, I don't think that I have seen somebody so complete in that sense. Whether it is your legal career, you have an LLM. I'm not saying people who don't have an LLM are not complete. I'm just saying that, as somebody who's starting out, people might have their tick boxes. लिटिगेशन कर लेता हूँ, फर्म ज्वाइन कर लेता हूँ, स्टार्टअप पे काम करके देख लेता हूँ, LLM कर लेता हूँ. You already have all those ticks, and more importantly, you've not just done it, you've excelled at all of it. And so, in that sense, to everybody who's watching today, and ma'am, is it okay if, in a very respectful way, make sure you do not go beyond it, or maybe you can send us mails first and then we can maybe ask her for it. But in a very respectful way, if they want to reach out to you for anything on maybe LinkedIn and all of that, can they do it, post this platform? Maybe if they want to learn something from you, whatever it is that you do, they already engage with you a lot on LinkedIn. I'm going to put your LinkedIn profile in the description if that's fine with you. But yeah, I mean, if that's also fine, they can probably reach out to you with all your due permission. And thank you so much. You really made this episode really special for me. And I think we've started 2026 with a huge bang. And I hope all the further episodes also come out to be in the same color and nature. Thank you so much for joining us today, ma'am. I'm really, really, grateful for having you on the show and in this episode.
Thank you, Nishank, and I wish you all the best for all your future shows as well. I will be watching them.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. I will stop the recording on this. Thank you so much, guys. If you watched this, do check out Mansi ma'am's profile. Do connect with her initiative. See if you can add anything to that. And thank you for being a part of this community. I really love all of you. And I'll hope to see you on the other side. Thank you so much.